In our previous lecture, we were talking about the Rajputs. We had talked about story of the origin of the Rajputs. We had discussed the process of their rise and expansion. Now we need to talk about their polity, society, and economy. First of all, Rajput polity. क्या important characteristics हैं इसके? Dominant feature of the political system of this period was civilization of the polity, wherein we see feudalization at the level of the central government. We see the feudalization of the military and the feudalization of local administration as well. As such, what kind of a king are we going to get? Very strong king or weaker king? Weaker king. So there was weak central authority. At the same time, at least superficially, kingship had the characteristics of absolutism, centralization, and divine origin. In theoretical terms, a well-developed bureaucratic system existed with various departments and functionaries to help the king in exercising central control. However, in reality, the picture was quite different. It was theoretical. Now, if we were to analyze the political system of the Rajputs as a whole, it was characterized by the absence of an all India empire, rather a multi-state system had emerged, and interstate relations were characterized by frequent warfare. This frequent warfare was contributing to the deep-seated political instability of this period. It was also having a direct relationship with the rise of feudalism and These two factors were resulting in the constant process of new state formation. Through warfare, often one lineage or dynasty was replaced by another, and because of the rise of feudalism, the centrifugal tendencies within the state were given a chance to further strengthen themselves. As a result, many new ruling lineages emerged from older ones. New kingdoms broke away from larger kingdoms. ठीक है, तो ये चीजें हमको यहाँ पे देखने के लिए मिल रही हैं. As a result of this constant warfare, also there was military, economic and political weakness. Military weakness because of realization of the polity. The kings depended largely upon the support of their feudal lords in order to support them during times of war. Economic weakness due to frequent warfare, which was depriving these states of their manpower and important resources. It was also disrupting trade, commerce, and agriculture. It was leading to loss of valuable revenues. And political weakness, once again due to feudalization as well as frequent warfare. That is political instability. Further, because the Rajputs were constantly involved in fighting each other, they did not have any awareness of threats that were developing on the northwestern frontier. So they had weak insights into foreign affairs. All channels of external contact were cut off by the 10th century. Not only were diplomatic relations abandoned, but even trade relations collapsed due to the politics. As a result, because of these weak insights, the Rajput rulers did not appreciate the seriousness of foreign threats, and this contributed, along with their general weakness, to greater vulnerability to external invasions. This was a major contributing factor towards the success of Turkish invasions. Okay? So these are the general features of Rajput polity. Give the heading: Rajput political structure and its nature. Rajput political structure and its nature. Write down. यहाँ से शुरू। The Rajput rulers, Rajput rulers, at least theoretically, enjoyed absolute powers. Next point. The concept of divine origin of kingship was an important feature of Rajput polity. With rulers adopting divine titles such as Gopal and Hari. Next point. Administrative centralization existed in theory. With contemporary sources mentioning the existence of or mentioning the presence of a large number of royal officials working in specific departments answerable to the kings. Royal officials working in specific departments answerable to the kings. Now, there is a text called the Lekha Paddhati. It is associated with the Chalukyas. There was no single author, rather this work evolved due to the interpolations and additions by a series of authors over a long period of time, several centuries. The work consists of several templates for royal orders and communication. For example, if the king had to make a particular order, issue a particular order, तो उसको एक करेक्ट फॉर्मेट में करना होगा, तो यहाँ पे वो फॉर्मेट मेंशन, राइट. For royal orders and communication, several templates were present in the Lekha Paddhati. Now, the Lekha Paddhati in the context of these templates mentions a number of departments. Known as Karanas, right? It also mentions a long list of officials, the presence of which has also been confirmed by some contemporary. ठीक है, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि केवल थ्योरी में ही है, at least to some extent it was actually in practice. ठीक, यही हमको. What is the last line that you have written? Answerable to the rule. Next point. The Lekha Paddhati furnishes the names of several departments or karanas in the context of the Chalukyas. Some of these terms are also mentioned in other historical records and inscriptions. Examples one by one you can write. Karana. This was the Chief Secretariat. Responsible for organizing the other departments. And functioning as a direct link between the king and his ministers. Next, Vyaya Karana. It was the department responsible for maintaining accounts Next, व्यापार करना. It was responsible for regulating trade and commerce. Next, मंडपिका करना. Which was responsible for collecting taxes. New department. Who used to head these departments? The ministers, right? Known as Mahamantris or Mantris or Mahamatyas, etc. They were assisted by secretaries known as Sachivas. Write down. These departments were headed by Mahamantris, Mahamatyas, mantris, etc. Further, they were assisted by secretaries known as sachivas. Okay. Next point. Apart from departments, several officials have also been mentioned. Such as, one by one you can write. Number one, Mahamantri, who was the chief minister, and held or exercised general supervision over all departments. Number two, an important official seems to be the महासंधि विग्रह का कौन होता था ये? We have also come across this official earlier context of the Guptas. Mahasandhi, he had become increasingly important during this period because of frequent warfare. He was the minister of war and peace. Okay? That means he was the foreign minister. Write down. Mahasandhi Vigrahaka, who was the minister of war and peace, and also enjoyed the power of conveying a grant. All land grants were possibly made through this office, Mahasandhi. Next, right. Also had the power of conveying all land grants. Okay. Next, right. Another important official was the Dandanayaka, also known as the Senapati, also known as the Baladhikrita. Who was he? The commander of the royal forces. He was the commander-in-chief. Write down. He was the commander of the royal forces. Okay. Now, apart from the Senapati, in the newly conquered territories, military occupation was exercised, and all the military outposts were also led by a particular official, right? And these heads of the local military outposts in the peripheral regions were known as Baladhipatis. Write down. Next point. Baladhipatis were military officials in charge of army encampments and outposts in newly conquered areas. Conquered areas or frontier areas. Conquered areas or frontier areas. Okay. Next point. As such, the Rajput political system at least superficially appears to be a highly centralized one, with a well-developed bureaucracy, However, the reality was quite different. Next point, next main point. Feudalization of the polity was an important characteristic of the Rajput political system. It was visible in all spheres of administration, including central, military, and local administration. It contributed to the weakening of the royal authority as kings were heavily dependent upon these feudal lords. Now, one development that took place during this period was the feudalization of the bureaucracy. When we say feudalization, what does it mean? Instead of these officials receiving cash salaries, they were paid in the form of land grants. These land grants were temporary or hereditary? hereditary increasingly became hereditary in nature, became permanent. These officials were also granted certain rights and privileges, such as the right to collect revenue, right to construct forts, and right to raise their own forces. Okay. Write down. An important development was the feudalization of the bureaucracy. Was the feudalization of the bureaucracy. Wherein officials in the central government were given hereditary land grants instead of cash salaries. They also enjoyed additional privileges, including the right to collect revenue, construct forts, and raise troops. Okay. How did this feudalization of the bureaucracy take place? दो processes हुए. ठीक है. First of all, those officials who were already present in the central government, they were given land grants and other privileges. Secondly, some of the important feudal lords in the peripheral zone, they were made important officials at the center. ठीक है. या तो कुछ सेंट्रल ऑफिशियल्स को लैंड दिए जाएंगे या फिर कुछ लैंडेड लॉर्ड्स को सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट में पोजीशन. राइट. राइट डाउन. The feudalization of bureaucracy occurred due to the parallel processes of A and B. Some royal officials receiving feudal grants, B. Some powerful feudatories being given royal offices. ठीक है. Next point, right. The Rajput military system was also characterized by the element of feudalism. Sub-point. While kings maintained their own standing armies, they depended largely upon the military assistance of their feudatories during wars. During wars. Military assistance wars. As such, the Rajput militaries were made up primarily of feudal levies. Feudal levies. So what kind of characteristics are going to be associated with such armies? Strong unified command or fragmented command? Fragmentation of command. Why the soldiers are going to remain loyal? They are going to obey the commands of their immediate superiors, people who are paying them, that is the feudal lords. अब ये बताओ, are these armies going to have the characteristic of cohesion and coordination or not? नहीं होगा. There is going to be weak cohesion and coordination, as different commanders perceive their situation differently. In different situations, there can be disconnect between the fighting force and these fragments. ठीक है, तो कई बार the Rajput advances may suffer because of this. Rajput defense also may suffer because of this. Write down. Due to subpoint. Due to the feudal military setup, the Rajput armies did not have a strong unified command and lacked cohesion and coordination. The coordination. Lacked cohesion and coordination. Okay. Now, in local administration also we are going to see feudalization. ये देखो कि यहां पर we also have the element of sub-infeudation. क्या मतलब होता है इसका? That at the top of the political pyramid is the king, right? However, his authority is quite weak and limited to the immediate periphery of his capital. Beyond that, there are a large number of powerful feudal lords exercising almost independent control in the areas under their jurisdiction, right? Now, during the Rajput period, the element of sub-infeudation also appeared. That means these feudal lords also got the right to further distribute and redistribute their lands among their subordinates. Okay? So, another layer of feudatories is going to be created. These lords also enjoyed the same rights. As a result, another layer of feudatories are going to be created. Now, this level of feudal lord, this level of feudal lord, this level of feudal lord have some overlapping powers. in the fields of revenue administration, law and order, and military organization and service. Okay? So this characteristic was a major feature of the Rajput polity, sub-infeudation, and local administration में ये overlap of powers was a very important characteristic. Write down. The local administration was highly feudalized. It was characterized by the element of sub-infeudation. Full stop. The feudatories of the kings could create their own sub-feudatories, and appoint their own officials. Stop. This resulted in the emergence of a hierarchical system with functionaries at different levels exercising overlapping powers. Exercising overlapping powers. Okay. Now, is this a feature of feudal sub-infeudation going to manifest itself uniformly across different regions, या फिर regional variations? In accordance with the geographic, ecological or political situation, changes are going to be there, right? Are the different levels of functionaries going to have the same titles, या फिर अलग-अलग titles होंगे different regions में? अलग-अलग titles होंगे in different regions. ठीक है? So write down next point. This system of sub-infeudation was characterized by a large degree of regional variation. ठीक है? Next point, they were known by a variety of titles such as some of the titles used: Samanta, Mahasamanta, Mandalik, Mahamandalik, महामंडलेश्वर, महाराज, राजा, ठाकुर, रानका, etc. Okay. In general, this feudal setup is known by the umbrella term of the Samanta system. The Samanta system. Okay. So, what was the relationship between the functionaries at these different levels? कोई link था या फिर नहीं था? Overlapping control था, and the functionaries at the lower levels were answerable and were expected to remain obedient or loyal to the functionaries at the superior level. Write down. Point. The feudatories at all levels, owed their, or sorry, had all levels had fiscal, FISCAL, fiscal and military obligations to their overlords. Full stop. Acha, what if a particular feudal lord did not respect these obligations, did not fulfill these obligations? Then the superior feudal lord or the king would be well within their rights to deprive this particular lord of his rights, titles and lands, right? However, this was not always practically possible. Kyun? Because due to the excessive feudalization, kings had lost their real ability to exercise this kind of control. Secondly, the kings also needed to balance various groups within the feudal hierarchy. So, अब ऐसा तो है नहीं that none of these feudal lords are going to be related to each other. None of them are going to share vested interests, right? So, if you sideline one feudal lord, it may harm the interests of another feudal lord, and the chances that these feudal lords are going to form a coalition to supplant the superior lord or maybe even the king himself was quite high. And ऐसा नहीं है that this was only in the realm of philosophy. This practically took place as well. Okay, write down. Generally, next point. Generally, the authority of the feudatories was dependent upon the fulfillment of these obligations. Top point. However, it was not always practically possible to enforce obedience. And concessions often had to be made. ठीक है। अच्छा, what is the general tendency, or what in which direction are the general interests of these various functionaries at different levels going to drive them towards loyalty or towards freedom? क्या इनका जनरल टेंडेंसी क्या होगा? More and more freedom, right? Write down. Moreover, the feudatory chiefs were eager to free themselves of the control of their overlords. So what was that thing which would ensure that the feudatories remain loyal? How to ensure loyalty of the feudatories? The use of superior force, or at least the threat of the use of superior force. So permanently there was a threat of suppression from the higher levels. So relationship कैसा होगा? On the one hand, it is defined by the bonds of loyalty, obedience, reciprocity. On the other hand, there is going to be some friction as well. Okay, write down. As such, same point. As such, the relationship depended upon the ability of the overlord to overpower the subordinates, overpower his subordinates. The point. As a result, while on the one hand, comma, the lord vassal relationship was characterized by loyalty and reciprocity, comma, the element of militaristic competition was always present, always present. ठीक है? Now, what was the chief duty of the subordinates? सबसे important चीज क्या था? To support the overlords in times of war. ठीक है? However, war time is a very precarious time. Each of these functionaries have a tendency towards maximizing their own power and their own. So often what will you see? Violations of the military obligations. In fact, even open treachery was not uncommon. That means a particular feudatory who wants more freedom but the king is not ready to give him that freedom would join hands with the enemy of the ruler, right, and attack his own king in unison with his enemy. तो ये सारी चीजें भी देखने के लिए, so that he may enjoy greater power in the, write down, while the chief duty of the feudatory was to provide military service during war. The episodes of treachery and betrayal were not uncommon. Betrayal were not uncommon. Subpoint: often feudatories betrayed their overlords during times of war. And joined hands with the enemy in expectation of greater power and privileges. Greater power and ठीक है. नेक्स्ट लिखो. The Rajput polity was characterized by the absence of a large, powerful empire. Full stop. Rather, a multi-state system had emerged. With several small Rajput kingdoms almost constantly fighting against each other. For greater control and territory. This led to a high degree of political instability. With fortunes constantly shifting. Next point. The rising demand for military mobilization also contributed to the growth of feudalism. Full stop. Next point. Both these processes contributed to the ongoing process of new state formation. The ongoing process of new state formation. Okay. Now, as an example, we can consider the case of the Parmars. In which region? Malwa, with their capital at Dhar, right? One of their cadet branches was ruling from Wagada. The Parmars were involved in constant warfare against powers such as the Chalukyas and Chauhans. Now, the chiefs of the cadet branch at Wagada remained loyal to the overlords at Dhar till the mid 11th century. और यहां पे क्या हुआ? Wagada rebellion and independence. So the Parmars of Wagada successfully broke away from their overlords at Dhar and established an independent kingdom. They themselves came into conflict against the Chauhans, right? And after a period of roughly 30 years, they themselves were uprooted by the Chauhans. Right? So we see new state formation in two ways in the same episode. Firstly, due to feudalism, the Wagada branch has established an independent kingdom, and because of the political instability which was characteristic of this period, they themselves have been uprooted by the Chauhans. Clear? Write down. We can take the case of the Parmars as an example. Write down the point. The Wagada branch of the Parmars continued to remain loyal to the Parmar rulers of Dhar till the mid 11th century, when it became independent. Full stop. Next point. This new kingdom itself was overcome by the Chauhans to warfare. To warfare. ठीक है? So this was the nature of the multi-state system. इसका एक आउटकम क्या हुआ? Constant process of new state formation. Next main point you can write. The Rajput kingdoms of this period suffered from military, political and economic weakness. Sub point. Due to the growth of feudalism, central authority had weakened considerably. In the practical sense. Central authority had weakened considerably in the practical sense. Next point. Rulers were militarily dependent upon their feudatories. Who were always eager to break away from their overlords. Next point, next sub point. The frequent warfare, which was a characteristic of this period, also deprived the Rajput states of their manpower and material resources. Next sub point. It also contributed to the further growth of feudalism. The further growth of feudalism. ठीक है? Next point, next main point. These Rajput kingdoms were therefore poorly prepared to withstand any determined foreign invasion. Full stop. Next sub point. In this regard, comma, the Rajputs who had the additional disadvantage of lacking a proper insight into foreign affairs. To foreign affairs. This was due to the following factors. Was due to the following factors. A, B, C करके. A, the scope of Rajput relations had become highly localized. In the backdrop of constant wars with immediate neighbors. Full stop. As such, comma, diplomatic relations with foreign rulers had largely been abandoned. Okay? This was one reason for the weak foreign policy insights of the Rajputs. Second, B, right? The decline of trade and commerce comma, especially foreign trade, had made external contact even less frequent. Okay? So international relations में you must have heard of track 1 diplomacy, track 2 diplomacy. So track 1 diplomacy through royal officials, through ambassadors. Track 2 diplomacy through businessmen who are engaged in relations with foreign countries, right? So दोनों ही tracks of diplomacy, now they were both out of the see, right? See, the Rajput period was characterized by the emergence of a highly insular social attitude. What does this mean? Insular social attitude? Contact with outsiders was avoided deliberately, since ideas of purity and pollution had become very strong. So members of the same society, Indian society, were considered superior and more pure as compared to outsiders. Outsiders were considered impure. As a result, a number of new ideas emerged, such as a taboo against foreign travel. ठीक है, क्या बोलने लग गए लोग? That if you travel across the salt water, you are going to lose your caste. If you travel to foreign countries, the land beyond which the munjwant grass grows, you are going to lose your caste. बिरादरी से बाहर निकाल दिए जाओगे. And the threat of loss of caste was a very, very debilitating factor. Right? The society became more and more inward looking. Contact with outsiders was avoided deliberately. And this sense, this idea of insularity also permeated into foreign relations. Okay? and thus the foreign relations of the Rajputs became highly localized, concerned immediately with their direct neighbors. के beyond कोई idea नहीं था क्या हो रहा. Clear? Write down. See, had become highly insular. वो लिख लिया ना. The concepts of the उसी में the concepts of purity and pollution dominated the society, and all outsiders were considered impure. Thus, contact with them was deliberately avoided. Thus, contact with them was deliberately avoided. Yeah. Main point लिखो. As a result of their political, military, economic, and diplomatic weakness, the Rajput states were highly vulnerable to external invasions. Full stop. This was one of the reasons for the success of Turkish invasion. This was one of the reasons for the success of Turkish invasion. ठीक है? Now, we have seen that in the scenario of the multi-state system, Rajput relations were characterized by constant warfare. So much so that the very idea of warfare had changed. Ideally, war क्या होता है? In the ideal sense, what is it? It is an instrument of practical necessity. Okay? So either this necessity is the desire for or need for greater resources, or the desire to defend one's own resources. Either offense or defense may be the practical necessity, right? However, the Rajput society and political system, because of its highly feudalized nature, because of the fragmented nature, because of multi-state system and frequent warfare, it had become heavily martialized. Okay? So there was heavy militarization of the state and society. The Rajputs had been constantly fighting against each other for almost 500 years. And the very concept of warfare had changed as a result of this. The Rajputs did not view warfare simply as an instrument of practical necessity any longer. वो था, but now warfare had transcended this material concern. It had emerged as a sport for them. It had become an important part of the Rajput lifestyle. War itself was glorified. And warriors were expected to participate in this sport to manifest in their life certain qualities, right? So they were supposed to participate in this sport in accordance with certain codes of conduct. तो sport को regulate करने के लिए हमेशा rules होते हैं. So the warrior ethic was redefined in this context. It was characterized by the codes of chivalry. किस तरह के रूल्स ऑब्जर्व करते थे राजपूत्स? Not attacking an enemy without warning. Not killing an unarmed enemy. Not surrendering at any cost. Not retreating even for strategic reasons. Not killing a wounded or surrendered enemy. Not fighting after dusk, right? तो इस तरह के रूल्स ये फॉलो कर रहे थे. And because of this they had some disadvantages. Right? So till the Rajputs fought each other, ये जो रूल्स ऑफ शिवलरी थे they were quite beneficial for regulating warfare. But what would happen if they came across a foe, an enemy who did not follow these rules? It would act against them. ठीक है? It would be to their own disadvantage. हम किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? The Turks. For the Turks, war was very much an instrument of political necessity. They did not actually observe these rules of chivalry. For them, everything was just. Whether deceitful or not, everything was valid. So the Rajputs were almost, you can imagine them fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. They were already quite weak और उसके ऊपर से ये बैगेज भी लेकर के चल रहे थे. ठीक है? So that is why this was another reason for their defeat against the Turks. Clear? Write down. Due to constant warfare during the Rajput period, and the sense of pride that Rajputs took in their status as warriors, war was no longer an instrument of practical necessity for them. No longer an instrument of practical necessity for them. Rather, it had become a highly ritualized and glorified aspect of the Rajput lifestyle and identity. Highly ritualized and glorified aspect of the Rajput lifestyle and identity. Next point, it was treated by the Rajputs like a sport. Where strategic objectives had a lower priority as compared to the display of personal courage, personal valor, compared to the display of personal valor. ठीक है, तो जीतो हारो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, एंड में ताली बजनी चाहिए, एवरीबडी शुड से वेल प्लेड, राइट? सो दिस वाज द आइडिया फॉर द राजपूत. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. As such, the Rajputs observed a strict code of chivalry, during wars as part of their warrior ethic. तो कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ धर्म पता है ना? The idea of duty, obligations, idea that each and every group has certain obligations that they need to fulfill. तो राजपूत के लिए उनका धर्म क्या था? War, and not only war in any way, but war in accordance with certain rules. And write down important rules observed by Rajputs during wars included ABCD करके लिख. Not attacking an enemy by ambush or surprise. B. Not killing an unarmed enemy. C. Not killing a wounded or surrendered enemy. not killing a wounded or surrendered enemy. D. Not fighting after dusk. E. Not surrendering or retreating even in the face of certain death. Even in the face of certain death. ठीक है? Next point, write down. These rules were a major disadvantage for the Rajputs when they came face to face with the Turks. Came face to face with the Turks. Full stop. The Turks considered war to be a means to an end and did not burden themselves with strict ethical restrictions during warfare. This also contributed to their success against the Rajputs. ठीक है? Take down a question. Discuss the salient features of the Rajput polity. How did it contribute to their defeat against the Turks? In marks, 200. ठीक है? So, two parts to the question. In the first part, we need to discuss the important features of Rajput polity. क्या है important features of Rajput polity? Superficially, centralization, but practically feudalism at the center, in the bureaucracy, and at the local level, the element of Sub-infeudation was also visible. Feudalization of the military was an important characteristic, leading to weak central authority and the strengthening of centrifugal forces. A multi-state system existed, contributing to perpetual political instability. Leading to the constant process of new state formation. ठीक है, ये हो गए important characteristics or features of the Rajput polity. How did it contribute to their defeat against the Turks? Political, economic, military and diplomatic inadequacies. Further, due to the constant warfare and political instability due to the heavy feudalization and militarization of the society, the emergence of strict code of warrior ethics, right? ये सारी चीजें यहाँ पर now this is a part of the political system only. हमने देखा कि feudalization was an important characteristic of the Rajput polity. How did the process of feudalization expand? किस तरह के feudal lords emerge होते हैं? That also we should write down. Different categories of feudatories during the Rajput period. देखो, feudatories emerged as important elements within the Rajput polity through a number of channels. Full stop. The Rajput feudal system, next point, the Rajput feudal system generally known as the Samant system, is characterized by the element of A, B, C, D, A, hereditary land grants, B, decentralization, C. Sub-infeudation, D. Devolution of military, revenue and administrative authority, E. The presence of a strong lord-vassal relationship characterized by military and fiscal obligations, military and fiscal obligations, from below, and protection of titular property and rights, titular property and rights from above. E तक हुआ ना? F, the element of centrifugal, sorry, not the element of, the presence of centrifugal tendencies, with intense militaristic competition between feudatories and their overlords. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. In this scenario, it is important to understand the process of the emergence of feudal lords within the Rajput states. ठीक है? In the introduction, we have said itself that several processes का result. So write down next point. Number 1. Some feudal lords emerged as the result of kings rewarding their officials and commanders in consideration of their valuable services. In our previous lecture, we have also seen how it is believed that the budded branches of the Parmars emerged as the result of the confirmation of some feudal rights on the brothers of the king by the king himself. Okay? So this was a form of reward. Second right, number 2. Some feudal lords built up their own principalities. Due to the expansion of economic and military power. And acknowledged the supremacy of their premier lineage, of their premier line. Example, Parmars of Vagada accepted the overlordship of the Parmars of Dhar. ठीक है. Number 3. Some feudal lords emerged by carving out their principalities in defiance of central authority. Especially during wartime. Next, number 4. On the other hand, defeated lineages were forced to accept the overlordship of victors. And become vassals. ठीक है. तो अलग अलग प्रोसेसेस देखे हैं, 4 प्रोसेसेस. पहले में क्या देखा? The king rewards his own officials and commanders by giving them hereditary land grants and privileges within his kingdom for valuable services. ठीक है. Secondly, what do we see? That due to the expansion of agriculture, emergence of military power, mobilization of military power, some new feudal lords emerge at the periphery and they accept the suzerainty of the overlord. ठीक है. तो यहाँ पे अलग अलग प्रोसेस. Third, we see that during times of war, when the king is weakest, some powerful feudatories may break away to set up a more autonomous unit. And finally, through the process of war, as one region is absorbed into the territory of another region, the local feudatory or ruler is forced to accept the suzerainty of the conqueror, of the victor. Through different processes, different kinds of feudal lords may. Next point, write down. These feudatories had many shared characteristics, but there were also widespread regional variations. There were also widespread regional variations. Okay? These are the different categories of feudatories under the Rajput. Next, we need to talk about the राजपूत सोसाइटी. बताइए क्या कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स थे राजपूत सोसाइटी के? हाँ, so it was characterized by increasing rigidity on the basis of the varna and caste identity. The society was extremely hierarchical in nature. It was dominated by the Brahmin Rajput alliance. There was a wide gap in the socio-economic status of the elites and the commoners. As a result, the Rajput society was characterized by the presence of massive inequality in status as well as opportunity. The social system was regulated by increasingly convoluted sense of purity and pollution. Further, the status of productive and trading groups was sharply declining due to the decline of production and trade related activities. On the other hand, the status of cultivators witnessed a marginal improvement due to the increasing importance of agriculture. As such, these groups enjoyed almost equal status. Majority of cultivators, whereas majority of craftsmen and traders, Vaishyas. The condition of Vaishyas and Shudras had become almost the same. Vaishyas had largely given up trading activities and were now practicing cultivation primarily. The Vaishyas also lived in the same areas as the Shudras. Another important observation that can be made about the Rajput society was the proliferation of castes. Number of new castes began to emerge. This process had been going on for a long time and it continued to happen. Why? Due to the expansion of agriculture, process of peasantization of tribes was going on, and these people had to be incorporated into the society and given a particular rank within the society. For that, new castes were created. This process was occurring simultaneously in all parts of North India, and in different regions a number of new tribes were being incorporated. Each of these tribes was given a specific caste status. Okay? So, regional variations also contributed to the emergence of a variety of castes. Further, the entrenchment of the ideas of purity and pollution coupled with the increasing importance of agriculture and the importance of ensuring that surplus flows from the producing class up to the elite class, the ideas of purity and pollution became deeply entrenched, and thus this also led to the proliferation of castes. सेम प्रोसेसेस जो पहले रिस्पॉन्सिबल थे, दे आर गोइंग टू बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल वंस अगेन. ये पहले भी हमने देखा था, नाउ ऑल्सो इट इज गोइंग टू बी. अनदर फीचर ऑफ द राजपूत सोसाइटी was the expansion of untouchability. Several categories of untouchables were emerging, and they faced heavy discrimination and exclusion within the society, were treated like complete outcasts. Further, the society also manifested various rigidities in the institution of marriage. What was the basis for marriage? Varna and caste. And in this sense, what was the rule? Endogamy or exogamy? Endogamy. Gotra was another identity which regulated marriage. In this case, what was the rule? Endogamy or exogamy? Exogamy. Now, these rules were not new and had been in existence for a long time. However, the contemporary commentaries on works such as the Manusmriti, such as the commentary on Manusmriti written by Medhatithi, lays a great degree of emphasis upon the observation of these rules. Okay? And prescribes harsh punishments for the violations of these rules as well. Okay? Now, according to Medhatithi, according to the Manusmriti, Anulom marriage between Brahmins and Shudras was possible. But now, even Anulom marriages, that means where man is Brahmin, woman is Shudra, that was prohibited. और ऐसा करने पे क्या होगा? The offspring is automatically going to be declared untouchable. In fact, both these partners are also going to lose their caste. Okay? So they are going to be outcast, disbanded from their community. Further, child marriage had become the norm for both men as well as women. While it was possible theoretically for a woman to leave her husband to marry somebody else, practice, this was almost never observed. So it was practically impossible to dissolve a marriage. Monogamy was the norm for the commoners, but for the elites, polygamy was the norm. However, polygamy was only one-sided. Only men were allowed to have multiple wives. उल्टा नहीं हो सकता. The condition of women continued to decline. What do we see? That although there was no system of parda or veiling, women were subjected to other evils such as child marriage, denial of education, denial of inheritance, restriction of widow remarriage, the expansion of the dowry system, the emergence of female infanticide, the evil of sati becoming more prominent, and the emergence of a new social evil, that is Johar. Okay? However, the picture was not so straightforward. यहाँ पे भी there is a little bit of contradiction. For example, the Mitakshara, which is a commentary on the Yajnavalkya Smriti, it gives inheritance rights to women. Some lawmakers also consider Swayamvar to be a valid medium for marriages wherein women had the freedom to choose their husband. Similarly, some lawmakers also give the right to widows to remarry. Similarly, the contemporary texts also talk about some highly educated and cultured Rajput women. Further, women also contributed to the growth of music, dance, and drama. Al-Masudi, who visited India in the 10th century, informs us that the Rajput princes allowed their women, their wives and daughters to appear in public without a veil, without a parda. There was no parda. But at the same time, it would not be incorrect to state that women in the Rajput period were heavily subordinated to men. The women were respected within the household as mothers and wives. So all the respect that they are deriving within the household is in relation to their male relatives. Okay? Without male relatives, women do not enjoy any individual identity. There was loss of individual identity during this period. Further, women, although they were not subjected to parda, were definitely subjected to social seclusion. Their roles were limited largely to within the household. There were only very few Rajput women who could break this barrier and enter public life. For the majority of Rajput women, they remained throughout their lives within the four walls of the household or the walls of the fort. ठीक है, तो ये था कंडीशन ऑफ the field of religion. What developments do we see? This was a golden period for Vaishnavism and Jaivism. A large number of temples were constructed. The kings and feudal lords made huge endowments to these temples and Brahmin priests, and the category of religious grants expanded during this period, known as Brahmadeya grants given to Brahmins and Devdana grants given to temples. Apart from Vaishnavism and Shaivism, we also find the growing popularity and patronage of Jainism, especially in the West, in Gujarat and Rajasthan. However, this period coincided with the sharp decline of Buddhism. During the Rajput period, both Bhakti and Tantricism continued to grow strongly. On the other hand, due to the entrenchment of Brahminical domination, Vedic sacrifices and rituals also gained in prominence. In fact, Bhakti was absorbed within the Vedic religion. Temples became the sites for Vedic sacrifices from now on. ठीक है, रिलीजन में ये चेंजेस देखने के लिए मिले हैं. Learning Science and education. क्या देखने को मिलता है? That some traditional centers of learning continued to flourish, such as Nalanda and Vikramshila. They continued to flourish. Some new ones also emerged, such as Dhar and Abu, Mount Abu, who had access to education. The elites primarily. So, access to education was highly restrictive. Women, Vaishyas, Shudras, untouchables were excluded from education. When it comes to the curriculum, it was a mixture of religious and secular knowledge. Religious knowledge में Vedas, Purans, Smritis, etc. Secular knowledge, mathematics, various sciences, law, philosophy, astronomy, and some specialized fields also, such as medicine, एग्रीकल्चर, हॉर्टिकल्चर एटसेट्रा. ठीक है, ये सारा नॉलेज देखने के लिए मिला हमको. However, one thing that we see in comparison to the previous ages, there were no new developments, discoveries, innovations in education. Education of this period was characterized stagnation. One of the reasons behind this may be the growing insularity of the society. Al-Biruni says that the Brahmin scholars did not accept any new knowledge from external sources. All external knowledge was discarded as being invalid even without analyzing it and understanding it properly. Okay? The insularity of the society was given as one reason for the stagnation of the educational system. Another reason for the stagnation of the educational system was its highly restrictive nature. Since education had become the preserve of a very small section of the population, had become a highly specialized field. जो already existing knowledge है उसी में further research हो रहा था, उसी के regarding नए interpretation. No new research was being conducted because no new groups were participating in the process. ठीक है, so its high exclusivism was also leading to stagnation. Now, Indian mathematics, science, astronomy, as a result of these things, fell behind foreign understanding of these. Clear? And thirdly, another reason for the stagnation of education was its growing association with religion. So, the acquisition of knowledge was now being seen as a matter of religious pursuit, right? Now, education free of religion, वहां पे क्या होगा? Natural inquisitiveness is going to be encouraged. लेकिन जब धर्म इंक्लूड हो जाता है, इसमें इन्वॉल्व हो जाता है, तो is any questioning possible? No. Therefore, the critical analysis needed for innovation, they were now discouraged, were now stopped. Okay? So all these things led to the stagnation of education. And as a result of stagnation of education, the discouraging of critical analysis, scientific inquiry, क्या होगा इसका result? The growth of superstitious beliefs and practices. ठीक है? So these are the various aspects of society during the Rajput period. क्या देखा है हमने? Increasing rigidity based on varna and caste. Society became increasingly hierarchical, dominated by a Brahmin Rajput alliance. The inequality within the society in terms of status and opportunity kept on increasing. The concepts of purity and pollution became deeply entrenched in regulating social relationships, leading to further inequality. The status of productive or trading groups, that is Vaishyas, declined due to the decline of trade and commerce, while the status of cultivators who were primarily Shudras improved, such that Vaishyas and Shudras occupied almost the same social rank. Proliferation of castes also kept on taking place due to the peasantization of tribes, emergence of regional variations, and the growing concept of purity and pollution, which necessitated greater differentiation within the society. Expansion of untouchability also took place, characterized by intense discrimination and exclusion. The institution of marriage was regulated on the basis of varna, caste and gotra. The restrictions kept on increasing. Monogamy was the norm for the commoners, while polygyny was the norm for the elites. Child marriage became more and more prominent, and it became almost practically impossible to dissolve a marriage, although certain exceptions were there. The condition of women continued to decline. While there was no parda system, women suffered from a number of social evils. However, there was some contradictory information also. at least theoretically, women were enjoying greater freedom. However, in reality, women were definitely subordinated to men. While they were respected members of the society, their identity depended upon their male relatives. They were respected within the household. As a result of which, women were alienated from their individual identity and were definitely subjected to social seclusion as well. In the field of religion, there was rapid expansion of Vaishnavism and Shaivism. Temple construction was undertaken at a monumental level. The Brahmins and temples were provided rich grants. There was a growth of Jainism as well. Bhakti and Tantricism continued strongly, and during this period, the separation between Bhakti and Vedic sacrifices that almost disappeared. Vedic sacrifices were, Bhakti was absorbed within the umbrella of Vedic religion. This period also witnessed the decline of Buddhism. In the field of science and education, while some old centers of education continued to flourish, some new ones also emerged, but education became highly restrictive, with large sections of the population being excluded from it. The curriculum consisted of a mixture of religious and secular education. Secular education was associated with the practical aspects of life during the early medieval age. However, education during this period also underwent a stagnation due to increasing insularity of the society, exclusivism of the educational system, due to which no new participants were being able to come up with new ideas, and the growing association of religion with the educational system led to the discouragement of scientific temper and critical inquiry, and this contributed to the growth of superstitious beliefs and practices. Okay? So these are the features of the society. Notes इसके कल dictate. I'm ending the class now. कोई doubts हैं तो please let me know. Any doubts? नहीं? Vaishnavi, shall I end the class? All right. Thank you.